Greetings from the Shigaraki family. Before the video commences, I am grateful to the original author for granting us permission to incorporate their work into our video. I am extremely grateful. The description contains the work of the original author. We will now proceed to the video. Physically Affecting Animal Mutation El Bazoo 5 Chapter 1. Life is not fair. All men aren't created or treated equally. This has been the way of life since the dawn of time. It probably will still be the same in 1,000 years. Maybe worse. 100 years ago, this way of life got worse, and it all started with a glowing baby. Through the evolution of humans and the emergence of quirks, wars were started, and families were killed and torn apart. At first, everyone hated the special ones. They feared them, and what people feared they sought to destroy. However, as time went on and as many more people started developing quirks, people started to accept this new way of life and adapted their way of living to use these powers. However, with great power comes great responsibility. Some people didn't go on with their everyday lives, didn't want to conform to others' wills, and they started using these blessings to hurt others. Criminals turned into villains. They went from petty crime to genocide. In the emergence of villains, the profession of heroes also rose, swiftly stopping those who sought to destroy. As people grew more powerful, though, the government made new laws to prohibit the use of quirks unless having a special license for them. Rankings were installed, making the once pure profession of heroism a competition for more fame and more money. Nowadays only 10% of the world is still quirkless. At first, people didn't care, so what if you couldn't turn your hair blue, or pop out your eyes from its socket? You were still considered human. But as people grew more powerful, people saw how little power those without quirks had. Friends and families turned on one another, all because of a single label: quirkless. The only thing worse than having no quirk, though, is having a mutant quirk. Those of the population that had physically affecting mutation quirks, or mutant quirks, were treated like monsters or freaks. They were muzzled, beaten and isolated. People feared them. But if you had an animal mutation, instead of being feared, you were looked down on, seen as weak, no better than quirkless. They were treated the worst. As quirks evolved, technology also did. New tech was built and encrypted with programs that not only helped people evolve their quirks but also helped them find them out before they even knew what it was. And, thank you Midoriya, I think that is quite enough. Right, I couldn't even finish my English assignment without interruption. Yes sir, I still have another 5 to 500 words for my presentation left. I'm sure you do, Midoriya, I'm sure you do. I hated that, the condescending tone. The way everyone underestimated me. I hated that I was seen as weak. But then again, that was better than being seen as less than human. Oh wait, I am. Without another word of complaint, I walk back to my seat, keeping my head down. However, I don't even make it 3 steps before a foot is planted in front of me, too quickly for me to avoid it. With a sickening crack, I tripped over the shoe and fell roughly on my wrist. Not making a sound, I quickly get back up and make the rest of the way back to my seat. This was nothing new. Every day I was belittled, beaten down, and had to endure the looks of pity and disgust that followed me not only at school or in the streets but also at home. It started 12 years ago, on the day I got my quirk. A physical affecting mutation quirk. Usually, when someone with a mutant quirk is born, they already have their quirk. I didn't, because if this no one thought I would have one, not even me. But then one day when I was 4, while I was playing with Kachan at home, I was suddenly hit with pain so bad that I passed out. When I woke, I was in a hospital with my parents shouting at the doctor outside. Later I found out that the pain was due to ears and tail appearing on my body. I had a physically affecting animal mutation quirk in the form of a fox. As part of my fox mutation, I have fluffy green fox ears, my human ears having receded when they came in. I have a fluffy tail that, if it weren't for all the fluff, would be mistaken for a cat's tail. The only thing that was really obvious about the mutation is the sharp canines I now have. Other than that, I have the enhanced senses of a fox and the instincts of a fox. Since that day my life has been turned upside down. The first blow was when my dad left. He left a week after the reveal, with nothing more than an explanation that he didn't want a weak freak. The next to go was Kachan. He lasted a month. At first, we talked about all the ways I could use my quirk to be a hero, and how we could still be the most dynamic hero duo. Yeah, that was a stupid name. Slowly though, he started pulling away from me. He stopped talking about how we could be heroes and started to avoid me. Until one day he used his quirk on me and gave me not only the nickname Deku but also the shiny bright scar on my chest. Finally, my mom left. She lasted 6 months. She didn't leave me in the traditional way of abandoning me, but sometimes I wish she did. Instead, she blamed me for dad leaving, she blamed me for her losing her job, and she blamed me for ruining her body. Instead of leaving me, she hurt me. First, she took away all the hero merch I had, and then she slowly but surely took away all my other possessions until I only had a book for school, some stationery, a blanket and a pillow. The only clothes I had left were my school uniform and one pair of shorts and one shirt. Then I lost my room. Instead of a room, I was moved to a small room that connected to my mom's room. Every day I was reminded of how I was useless, how I was to blame for everything that was wrong with the world. Every day new scars appeared on my skin in the form of starbursts. From Kachan, long slashes on his arms and legs, his classmates, and little pieces of missing flesh on his arms and back, his mother. That brings us back to today. It was the day everyone had to do an English assignment on the dawn of quirks, meaning everything had to be written and spoken in English. I kinda went over the word limit of 600 words by just a little. I have 2,000 words. Due to my mutation, everyone at school started to hate me. They either saw me as weak or saw me as a freak. At first, I didn't really care. I loved my quirk. But then the spider lilies became frequent, and the collection of scars on my skin grew more substantial. I went from the outgoing happy boy to the shy freak that had anxiety and panic attacks just from hearing a loud pop. But I could handle it. In just 10 months I will be taking the UA entrance exam, and everything will be okay. I will be away from Kachan, I will be able to be away from mom more often. That's if I actually pass the exam. Realistically I know I won't. I'm a freak with a weak quirk. And why would UA want someone as weak as him, as stupid as him? Why would they even accept his application? Wouldn't it be better if he just didn't apply? Wouldn't it be better if he just crawled into a hole and never came out? Wouldn't it be better if he just killed him? And he's having a panic attack. Okay, that's fine, just hold it and wait until BRRRRINNNGGG. And that was the bell. Without waiting for the teacher to say anything, I quickly took my stuff and sprinted to the only room in the school where no one could get to me, the janitor's closet. Quickly slam the door behind me and lock it before I find the darkest corner of the room, where I finally let myself break down. This wasn't the first time that during the midst of hyping myself up, I start to spiral into self-deprecation. At first, I couldn't control my emotions enough to hold in a panic attack, but over the past 12 years, I learned that having a panic attack was not a good idea. After I finally calmed down from my episode, I started eating my lunch, both hoping the day would end and hoping it wouldn't, for obvious reasons. When the bell goes later in the day signaling the last class of the day, I start counting the minutes until I can finally leave. Sometime in the middle of the class the teacher stops the lecture. I think he was talking about careers. Oh, who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes anyway. He suddenly yells out, throwing out the career pamphlets onto the floor. That would probably be a pain to clean later. I don't have long to think about that though, because not long after the teacher says that every person in the class starts yelling and using their quirks, being overall loud. This only stopped when Kachan started laughing. Ha ha ha. Oi teach, don't lump me in with these losers, I'm the real deal. They can be lucky if they end up a sidekick to some crappy D-lister. The silence Kachan heeds don't last long until again people are yelling. This time about how arrogant Kachan must be. What are you extras talking about? I aced the mock exam. I'll be the only one from this shitty school to get into UA. Aren't they only doing an acceptance rate of 7% this year? I heard it's super hard to get in. The written exam is rumored to be really hard. I heard the practical is worse. On and on people talked over each other, exclaiming their shock at what they were hearing, again just being loud. At least I was being ignored. Hey Midoriya, aren't you also applying to UA? Never mind. Guess the teacher doesn't understand how he can't actually release private student information to the class. Suddenly the surprise shouts from Kachan's announcement turned into loud laughter, and people started to mock me, the useless freak, about trying to get into UA. Ha Deku. Why would UA accept a Deku like you? You listen and you listen well. I will be the only one in this crappy school to get into UA. The others won't make it far, but you. Ha, you'll die in the exam. So don't even think of applying to UA, you useless freak. and they're Kachan blowing up my desk. And yup, I'm on the floor again. Nothing new. Not wasting another second on me. Kachan moves back to his desk and the teacher continues on with his lesson, not even bothering with me. Nothing new. After the final bell goes 20 minutes later, I'm just about to run out of the door when Kachan and his two lackeys block my path. They don't say anything or even do anything but look at me until everyone else has left the room and it's just us. When it is, it's like a switch was flipped because instantly, the two other boys are pushing me up against the nearest wall and holding me there. Kachan slowly moves towards me, anger in his eyes that scares me more than normal. Well, look what we have here. We caught a useless Deku. Tell me what went through your useless fucking head when you applied for UA. You're a fucking animal, a useless freak. Why would anyone want you? As Kachan was saying all this, he was still stalking slowly to me until he was right in front of me, before I can process anything. Kachan punches my stomach, enhanced by an explosion, forcing the air out of my lungs. I thought I had gotten the message across last time not to apply, but it seems you just never learn. Let's fix that, shall we? What I hate more than the yelling is when Kachan is quiet, so when he started whispering, I could already feel the pain that was to come. And come it did. For the next however long it was, Kachan beat me up using whatever he had on him, always enhanced by his quirk. By the time he was done, he was on the ground, no longer being held up, lying in a pool of his own blood with at least 2 new scars covering his shoulder and stomach. Right as the 3 started to leave, Kachan stopped and looked over his shoulder at me. You know, if you really want to be a hero so bad, there's an easy way to do so. Pray you'll be born human in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. And with their laughter following them, they left. I didn't. I stayed lying on the floor, the bleeding starting to slow down. I don't know how long I was lying there, but all I could think of was those words. The words I had heard so many times but never from Kachan. I never thought that the relationship between us would crumble so far. What happened to the boy I used to know? The one that stood up for me against high schoolers when we were in preschool? What happened to all the play dates and sleepovers we had? What happened to my best friend? Finally, at some point, I found the energy to stand up, and using the towel I kept on hand for these types of days, I cleaned up the blood before I slowly started making my way home. Not wanting to be home anytime soon after what just happened, I took a detour through an underpass and headed towards the nearby park. But just my luck, because I don't even make it halfway through the underpass before I hear a bang as the grate behind me flies into the air, landing in front of me. I don't even have a chance to turn around before something leaps on me, something gooey and wet. And before I can even make a noise, that same gooiness is being shoved down my throat. Vaguely I hear the thing on me speaking. Nice medium-sized skin suit. You'll do. Well kid. Now don't worry, it'll hurt for another 20 seconds and then it's down. Thanks a lot for this kid, you're my hero. I didn't want to be a hero in this thing, but I had no choice. I was slowly but surely suffocating. Soon black dots started appearing in my vision, and as I kept clawing away at the substance forcing its way down my throat, I thought about if this was really how I was going to die. Just before I passed out, I heard yelling, and then it was darkness. I wasn't in the dark for long though, a hard slapping on my face bringing me face to face with none other than All Might, the #1 hero. Gasping for air, I stared awestruck at my idol. All Might, see that I was awake, stood up and went back to pick up this green slime off the walls around us. At one point I saw him pick up eyes and teeth, and that's when it hit me. That was a person whose quirk made them into sludge. I had a villain down my throat. That realization had me turning my head and throwing up whatever was in my stomach. Since there wasn't much to begin with, I started dry heaving, having bile, green slime, and even some blood come up. When I was finally finished with that, I turned around again to see that All Might was also finishing up. Before he could leave though, I called out to him. Wait, All Might, do you think that someone with a quirk like mine could ever be a hero? I hoped I would hear the answer I wanted. I mean, he always said in his interviews that anyone could be a hero. So that would mean you a hero? No kid, I don't think so. We need normal people, useful people. You would not only be a liability, but you're not even human. So, no, you can be a hero. It's nice to have dreams, but be realistic. And with those he flew off, taking my hope with him. You can't be a hero. Chapter summary. Izuku doesn't remember much of what happened after his talk with Kachan, but he does remember him ending up on a roof. Not wanting to waste an opportunity, he jumps. Chapter 2. After All Might flew off, I sat there stewing in my own thoughts. I mean, what did I expect? For All Might to actually care about a freakish useless thing like me. No, that was obviously too much to ask for. I don't know how long I sat there thinking like this, but at one point I stood up and just started walking aimlessly. That was until an explosion nearby drew me out of my thoughts. Automatically I started in the direction of the explosion. When I got there, there was a big crowd surrounding an alleyway. The crowd was a mixture of civilians and heroes. Heroes that were just watching and arguing with each other. Pushing my way to the front of the crowd, I caught sight of a familiar slime villain, this time with a new hostage. What happened? I thought All Might caught the guy and took him to the police station. Did the guy escape? Did All Might drop him while in the air? Why isn't anyone doing anything? Aren't they hero? Before I could continue to spiral in my thoughts of whys, I finally caught sight of who the hostage was. It was Kachan. My heart stopped. You would think that it was fear for myself or something like that, but it wasn't. I was scared for Kachan. He was there suffocating in the same way I had just before. But this time people didn't come in to help him. They just stood around and argued about who should help him. A kid was dying and all they thought about was themselves. All that was going through my head was the happy memories I had with Kachan. That time he played the villain because I was sad and wanted to be the hero. That time he beat people up to protect me. That time I don't know what was happening, but the more I thought about the happy memories, the more upset and angrier I got, and the more pressure I felt building up inside of me. Then I locked eyes with Kachan, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. That caused me to move. Without even thinking, I pushed past the police barricade and ran at the villain. Running on pure instinct and adrenaline, I reached for that building pressure and I pushed. There was an instant result. Around me green flames burst into existence, heading straight at the villain. I watched as the flames slammed into him and caused him to pull back from Kachan. This caused me to act. While he was still reeling from the flames, I grabbed Kachan and, with strength never seen before, threw him towards the heroes before facing the villain again. As I turned, the same green flames appeared again, but this time stayed circling me, waiting for my command. And a command I gave. Instead of circling me, the flames rushed forward and became a flame wall that surrounded the slime from all sides, trapping him. Before I could do anything else though, All Might burst in with a powered punch, extinguishing the flames and splattering the villain across the cement floor. Rather harsh, I thought. Again, I didn't have time to dwell on my thoughts, this time because I was being dragged through the thick crowd around a couple of corners before being turned to face Kachan. His red eyes were burning with fury, sweat dripping down his chin, and his hand and wrists were wrapped in bandages. His grip was tight as he pushed me against a building, his breath coming out in harsh pants. What the fuck was that back there, huh? Do you think you can flaunt your freakish quirk and people are going to start liking you? You think that I'm so weak that I needed you to save me? Well, I didn't, you fucking useless freak. With each word and shout he pushed me harder and harder against the wall. In the end, he threw me against the wall so hard that I hit my head hard enough for it to start bleeding. Screaming wasn't enough for him apparently, because he started using his quirk to punch my face and stomach. However, Kachan soon grew tired or bored, probably both, and left me there on the deserted street. I stayed on the floor for a few seconds before robotically getting to my feet and just walking. I didn't think about where I was going, only that I had the feeling of needing to be somewhere, needing to do something. Before long I came back to myself. However, I was on the roof of an office building. How I got here I don't know. However, I didn't focus on that. I focused on the sunset I could see falling off the edge of the building's ledge. Unconsciously I started walking forward, toward the sun. When I got to the ledge I just stood there, swaying with the wind to the beautiful, wordless tune of impending death. Soon the wordless tune became words though. Freak. Kill. Not human. Yourself. Useless. Kill. Weak. Yourself. Those words constantly played in a loop, like a morbid chant. With each repeat, I leaned forward until I was almost over the edge. Then with one last tilt, I fell. Aizawa's POV. God, I hate Fridays. Instead of being at home with my loving husband and son, I instead have to be out just before sunset until just before sunrise for patrol. I love being a hero, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I regret going into underground heroics instead of being a spotlight hero. But then I remember the press and everything else about being a spotlight hero and then go back to loving being an underground hero. Today had been an extra hectic shift already. I had barely been on shift for 30 minutes in. Already I had to stop a burglary, an assault and a mugging. God, I needed sleep. As I was roof hopping though, I caught sight of a green person, walking out onto an office building roof. As I got closer, I realized it was a person, but it was also a kid. He had fluffy forest green hair with matching ears on top. He was small, probably around 13 or 14. Before I could analyze more of his appearance, he started walking up to the ledge, leaning dangerously forward. Realizing what was about to happen, I ran faster toward him, hoping to be able to catch him in time. Just as he started falling off the ledge, I landed on the same roof as him. Quickly sending out my capture scarf, I ran toward the ledge, hoping I caught him. Looking over, I saw that I had indeed caught him, and he was hanging limply in the scarf, passed out. Quickly pulling him back up to the roof, I quickly took out my phone and called for backup. This is Pro Hero Eraserhead. Code 67856. I'm requesting medical attention at XXX cause suicide attempt. I quickly said, making sure to follow protocol. After getting confirmation of an ambulance en route, I hung up and quickly examined the boy to make sure he was okay. Now that I was closer, I could see that his face was covered in small little freckles that trailed down his neck. He had cute pouty lips and round chubby cheeks from baby fat. Dane, this kid was cute. And this is a purely parental relationship. He is saying Izuku is cute in a child sort of way. He was also way too skinny. Looking closer, I could see a few scars on his cheeks, faint and not looking that painful. He was adorable but clearly had been hurt by the world. Looking over the rest of his body, I realized he had two fluffy tails wrapped tightly around his waist. While he unconsciously started to curl up into my lap, his hand tightly gripping my captured scarf. Cradling him close, I feel a wetness on my hand. Pulling the hand away from his head, I saw that there was blood on my hand. He was bleeding from his head. Looking closer at him, I saw that his white school shirt had patches of red slowly spreading. Shit, this kid was hurt. Before I could start assessing his injuries, the ambulance arrived and in minutes they banged open the roof door and rushed to us. 13 or 14-year-old male, suicide attempt. Has unidentified injuries on head and upper body, not received during the attempt. I quickly filled the paramedics in. Quickly they try to detach the boy from me to put him on the stretcher. However, it becomes apparent very fast that he isn't letting go of me anytime soon in any attempt to force us apart. Has him whining. It's an easy decision for me to just carry him to the ambulance, an easy decision to sit on the bed with him in my lap, and an easy decision to walk into the hospital, then into his hospital room, sit on his bed and hold him while the doctors examined him. They found a fresh bleeding wound on the head already healing, and under his shirt, they found bruises, cuts both fresh and scared, starburst scars and small missing chunks of flesh, all on his chest and arms. While checking under his pants, the same was found. Just what happened to this boy? Finally, after the examination, we were able to safely detach him, dress him and then lay him down in the hospital bed. I stayed in the room though, sitting on the chair beside the bed. Before I took a nap, I made sure to have someone fill my shift and texted Hisashi to let him know what was happening. Not waiting for a reply, I was out like a light. Izu's POV. Beep 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 beep. Is this heaven or hell? Beep 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 beep. Probably hell. Beep 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 beep. Only hell would torture people with an annoying beeping noise. Wah, p. Was that someone speaking? T-re? There's another voice. At, n. Ow. Why are there voices? E-L-D-N, by ow. Is this not hell? Deciding I had enough of the faceless voices, I opened my eyes. Only to get blinded by a bright light. Was this actual heaven? Blinking my eyes rapidly, I started to adjust to the light. Looking around, I realized that I was in a hospital room. Why wasn't I dead? Why couldn't I just give up? Am I really so useless that I couldn't even die properly? Without even realizing, I had started to have a panic attack. The loud beeping got louder and faster, the machine screeching loudly. My breathing started to get really labored. I couldn't breathe. Why couldn't I breathe? Suddenly a voice interrupted my panic. Breathe. Come on kid, breathe. You're safe. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That's it, keep going. You're doing great, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. The voice sounded panicked and worried. But the voice was also soothing and relaxing. I followed the breathing rhythm until I could finally breathe properly. While doing this, I curled my body into the soothing voice, unconsciously seeking out the heat I could feel coming off of them. They were so warm and soothing that I couldn't help but let my eyes fall shut, a purr starting to rumble through me. Before I could fall asleep though, a rumbling came from the chest I was laying against. Slowly blinking my eyes open, I look up to see a homeless-looking man. He had long dark hair that fell messily around his face, a stubble that looked a few weeks old, and a scarf wrapped around his neck. A scarf wrapped around his neck. "Oh, my God! You're Eraserhead!" I suddenly exclaimed. Even in my sudden excitement, my voice stayed barely above a whisper, my throat killing me just from that small amount of talking. When was the last time I spoke that loudly? Eraserhead seemed shocked that I knew him, yet his expression didn't change from the soft caring look in his eyes. Looking around the room, I realized that I was in a hospital. The spotless white walls, the annoying beeping of a heart monitor, and the sight of a doctor standing at the end of the bed, looking a bit impatient with his eyebrow raised. Unconsciously I started shielding away from him, curling up closer to Eraserhead. Now that he had my attention, he started talking. "Now that you're paying attention, I can get you discharged and out of the hospital. Your injuries are mostly healed, so you'll be fine. Now if you'll excuse me." The more he talked, the more Eraserhead was getting mad. It got to the point where he just cut the doctor off. "Excuse me, but shouldn't there be a doctor with a healing quirk that is supposed to come and heal him? Aren't you supposed to keep people with head injuries overnight for observation to make sure there's no brain damage? Why the hell are you just telling him to leave?" The more he talked, the louder he got, until he was just screaming at the doctor. Through it all though, he kept one arm around my waist, keeping me close, and the other hand was on my head, having it lay against his chest while also petting in softly, keeping me calm. "Look, we have already wasted enough of our time and materials on the thing. We have more important people who need our attention and care more than this animal does. Just take it back home and leave us alone." "I don't give a damn what you say. Get me your supervisor now." Huffing, the doctor left without complaint. Aizawa's POV. The shit stain of a doctor. Like really, the doctors are supposed to be impartial. To not be biased or quirkiest. But this person was. Before I could get too angry, the doctor came back with his manager. He looked smug. "My employee says you're giving him trouble. May I ask what the problem is?" he asked. It was said gently, but there was a bit of bite in his voice. "Yes. Well, you see, your employee is acting very quirkist right now. He refuses to follow protocol and he refuses to treat the kid. So yes, I would say I have a problem with him." The more I talk, the more anger that seeps into my voice. The kid must hear it because he starts curling into himself more. I quickly go back to petting him, trying to calm him. I can see on the doctor's face that his mood does a 180. He goes from annoyed at me to having pure fury written on his face. Slowly, he starts turning around, facing the other doctor. When he speaks, he doesn't shout, he talks in a falsely calm voice. "I see, and Jeremy, what do you have to say for yourself about this?" "Jeremy, that must be the doctor's name. Well, don't you have eyes? That freakish mutant shouldn't even have been allowed through the front door. Let alone have us waste our resources on it. I was only doing what's right, getting rid of a pest." Jeremy spits out, clearly thinking that his supervisor is going to take his side. He was wrong. The calm facade he was portraying instantly crumbled. Before saying anything else to Jeremy, he turned back to me and the kid. "I must apologize for the behavior of my ex-employee. Please be assured that I will make sure he is dealt with accordingly. I will also send in a nurse to do a quick exam of the kid to make sure that there is nothing that needs to be dealt with immediately. I will be back soon to personally oversee the rest of his treatment when I am done with Jeremy." The doctor then stormed out of the room, taking Jeremy with him. As soon as the two were out of the room, the kid sat up straight a bit more, his grip though didn't loosen. Turning to look down at him, I saw him looking at the door with stars in his eyes, shock and awe written across his face. I quickly realized I didn't even know the kid's name. "Hey kid, mind telling me your name? It's fine if you don't want to, just thought I should call you something other than kid," I quickly asked. He seemed to debate with himself for a second before looking around for something. When he apparently couldn't find what he was looking for, he turned back to me making a hand gesture like he was writing. It took me a second to realize that he wanted something to write with. Quickly I opened a notes app on my phone and handed it over. He was quick to type something before handing it over hesitantly. "Izuku." Looking back at the kid, I saw him looking around nervously. "Well, Izuku, do you want to talk about what happened?" "I'm sorry." Chapter summary. Izu's truth revealed. Sign language. Izu's POV. For the longest time, I just sat there, not answering. How do I tell my favorite hero that I Was being bullied and abused. How do I tell my favorite hero that All Might told me I was useless? How do I tell my favorite hero that I'm scared of? My thoughts spiral as I quickly fall deeper into a panic, my breathing speeding up, my heart hammering. I can't breathe or think. I can't feel anything but the pain in my shoulder, the pain in my chest, the pain everywhere. I thought I could see Kachan's hand reaching out towards me, and instincts kicked in. Not even thinking, I curl into myself, making myself as small as possible while at the same time baring my teeth. It's a weird combination of flight and fight's responses, being prey and predator. Through it all I could hear insistent beeping and a frantic voice. Then as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. My heart went back to normal, my breathing started getting steadier and the fog over my eyes lifted. I could see the white of the room, the light coming out of the window beside me, and worried red eyes looking at me. Putting all my attention on the red eyes, I noticed other things. I noticed the loud beeping in the room had stopped, I noticed that the pain I was feeling was gone, and I noticed that there was a warm hand resting on my head, petting me. As soon as I realized what that hand was doing, an embarrassed flush spread through my face, creeping down my chest. My earlier panic now forgotten. I realized that the eyes I was looking into belonged to Eraserhead. Slowly I started remembering where I was and what had happened. I wasn't with Kachan. He was hurting me. I wasn't at home with Inko pulling flesh off me. I was in the hospital, with Eraserhead, after trying to commit suicide. That thought had my earlier panic starting to come back. Before I could spiral again though, the warm hand holding me started petting me in earnest. This caused me to start purring, leaning into the warm hand, and the warm body attached to it. Slowly I started to drift off. Again, and I must have actually fallen asleep because the next thing I know, a soft hand is running through my hair, an equally soft voice pulling me from sleep. Opening my eyes, I realized a few things rather quickly. First, I had been asleep for a while considering it was now starting to be dark outside. Second, the doctor must have patched me up while I was sleeping as I had new bandages wrapped around me, most of them feeling healed. Lastly, while Eraserhead was in the room, he wasn't the one petting me, he was leaning against a wall looking softly at me. Turning to look at who the hand belonged to, I came face to face with a person, a physically affected person, who was looking so softly and lovingly at me. Usually, I would have panicked by now, but the look in those eyes combined with the warm hand on my head caused me to just lean further into it, closing my eyes again. Before I could start to drift though, the creature gave a soft chuckle and started talking. "Hi, little kit. It's nice to finally meet you. I hope you're doing better now," the creature said. That voice sounded so familiar, but with the hand still combing through my hair, my thoughts were slow and hard to form. Humming, I just leaned further into the soft hand. "I don't know if you recognize me, but I'm Nedzu. I'm also the one you've been chatting to online." Hearing that finally brought me out of my peaceful state. Opening my eyes, I finally sat up and looked properly at the stranger. He was taller than me, though just shorter than Eraserhead. I'm making Nedzu be more human-like because I said so. He had white fur covering parts of his body, white mouse ears on his head and a long rat-like tail. He was wearing a crisp suit and looked every bit the powerful person he was. Though he looked powerful, the soft expression and tone he used on me made me feel safe and welcome. Remembering what he just said, I was confused, and then it hit me, the online friend I had made was the Nedzu. About 2 years ago, I joined an online chess group where we competed against each other in chess but also talked to each other. There was one person, RatKing21, that I had really connected. At first, it was just because the user was the only one to challenge me, but then the more we played each other, the more we started talking, till it got to the point where we were talking daily about our lives. Privately, I had looked forward to the talks and games every day to the point where if I focused only on that I could get through any day with a smile. To find out that the online friend I had made was the principal Nedzu, principal of UA, my dream school, makes my head implode. I want to overthink this, want to think that now that he knows what a useless freak I am he will leave. But I just can't. Because through the years of knowing RatKing21, I started relying on them for comfort. They were what made life worth living for so long. And it's also quite hard to think those thoughts when he has his fur-covered hands running swiftly and softly through my hair, with those kind eyes looking at me with so much care. Before I could even try to think up self-deprecating thoughts, Nedzu is talking again. "I know you have already had an eventful couple of days, but I was wondering if you were up to speak. It's okay if you're not and want to wait. Whatever you decide," and those caring words The fact that he was catering towards me made my heart melt. It made me want to cry. And just curl up. But I don't. Instead, I just nod my agreement, looking around for something to use to write. Both me and Aizawa know sign language if that makes things easier for you. Nodding my head slightly, the questions begin. How old are you? 16. Can you tell me why you had all those injuries? Do I have to? No, you don't. However, if you told me, I would make sure that whoever did that to you will never hurt you again. I will make sure they never see the light of day again if I have it my way. After that declaration from Nedzu, I didn't know what to say. For a while afterwards, I didn't say anything. I just sat there thinking. Should I tell them? Would they still want to protect me? Thankfully, I didn't spiral into my thoughts again. I just contemplated what I should do. Finally, I came to a decision. Okay. I'll tell you. But can I have your word that you will do something about it if I do tell you? I couldn't help it when my hands shook. I was so nervous to actually tell someone about what my life had been like for the past 14 years. I didn't know what would happen after, but I just knew that I could trust them with my secrets, so I told them. Nedzu's POV. When I first got the call, I was at UA. It didn't matter that it was late at night, I was still at school making sure everything would be prepped for the entrance exam. I had been doing a check of all the cameras when I got a notification that Eraserhead had called for emergency backup. I usually only get these notifications if it was serious, so I instantly put everything aside. When I saw that it was because he had stopped a child's suicide, I immediately started hacking into the city security feed. As soon as I got the video I wanted, I did a facial recognition of the person and identified them as Izuku Midoriya. After that, I learned everything I could from them. I did a search through not only the files mentioning him but also looked at any security feed I could find of him at school, near his home and around the city. What I found shocked me. This child was like me, a person with POM. Not only did he have to suffer from people thinking him weak, but from the look of this feed he was also being harassed, abused and heavily bullied. The way those bullies beat him with not only their bodies and quirks but also with their environment. Using rocks and desks and anything they could find to hurt him. The scars this child must have. When Shota called me later to tell me about the kid, I was instantly on my feet and driving to the hospital. When I arrived at the room, not even waiting to ask a nurse for the room number, my eyes were instantly drawn to the adorable bundle on the bed. He was curled up in a small ball, buried in the blankets surrounding him. I couldn't help but be drawn to the child. I felt an unknown instinct to protect him, to shower him with affection. Reacting to one of my more tame instincts, I walked over, crouched down and started gently petting his hair. I didn't bother to acknowledge Shota, knowing he was probably sleeping or was watching me closely. Not long after, the child started to stir. It started with him leaning more into my pets, then with his purr getting louder, and finally with his eyes fluttering open. It revealed two beautiful emerald eyes that shined like the same gems they represented. When the haze of sleep lifted, and he comprehended who I was, I finally spoke. I made sure my voice was soft, but I couldn't hide the affection I felt. I couldn't help it, though he was just so adorable. Continuing on, I made sure to introduce myself professionally and tell him how he knew me. I could see when he realized who I was, because the small tension lining his body instantly melted when he realized who I was. Though I didn't want to, I knew that I had to ask him about his injuries. Even if I saw how he got some of them through the cameras, I wanted to hear it from him. I also knew that there would be things that I missed in my rush or that weren't captured by the cameras. I started the questioning with something light, just his age and name, but I knew I couldn't delay the heavy ones, so I went straight into it. I could see the hesitance on his face to say anything. Could practically feel the mistrust, so when he asked for my promise that I would do something, I readily gave it, and he started talking. And my heart dropped. He started from the beginning, going back 12 years. 12 years, this child had to go through this since he was 4 years old. As he talked, the more the horror grew. His own mother didn't even love him. His best friend turned their back on them. How this boy survived, I will never know. Izu's POV. I couldn't hold on to the truth any longer. As soon as Nedzu and Eraser gave me their word, the words just started tumbling out of my mouth. I started when I was 4, told them how the people close to me reacted to my quirk, and then told them how my life changed afterwards. I could see Nedzu's face contorting into an obvious rage. Eraser looked like he was in pain with a grimace on his face. Even though I somewhat knew their anger and pain weren't directed at me, I couldn't help but fear it was. When I got to the end of my story, I started to curl into myself, worried that they might take those feelings out on me. Looking down, I prepared for the worst. only to have that same soft hand that I forgot about start running through my hair. A calming voice started talking with it, not saying anything at first, just making wordless reassurances. Slowly the tension in my body gave way to loud purrs that I couldn't help but let out. When I had calmed down and curled up into the new lap next to me, Nezu finally spoke again. "I am so sorry you had to go through that. You know I went through something similar." At those words, I jerked my head up to stare at him, now realizing it was his lap I was in. Yeah, I was born with my mutations, and when my parents saw me, they instantly abandoned me. I was put into foster care, and when I turned 4 the other part of my quirk awakened. I may have been born looking like a bear, but the other part of my quirk is called high specs. It gives me heightened intelligence. Since I was a baby, I had been moved around a lot, but when I turned 4 it got worse. They didn't want a smart freak. Here he gave a sort of self-deprecating chuckle. Hearing not only the story but the chuckle, I curled up more into his lap, resting my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. When he calmed himself a bit, he continued. "When I turned 5, I was moved to the last family. They did experiments on me, turned me into a chimera of not only a bear but also gave me rat, dog and mouse genes. When I was 14, I was rescued by a hero with Palm. He's the reason I became a hero. After that experience, I swore to myself to never have another child suffer like I have. And I am so sorry I couldn't stop this from happening to you." By the end of his story, he had started softly crying. At first, I didn't say anything, just silently cried with him. But I couldn't help but want to speak. When I spoke to Eraserhead earlier, I was surprised because I hadn't really spoken outside of school presentations in a couple years. I wasn't even aware I had really spoken until Eraser answered me. But now, for the first time in years, I have the urge to say something. "It's okay. I'm sorry you had to go through that." When I spoke, my voice was hoarse and scratchy. But I got the words out, and Nezu looked both shocked and touched. He pulled me into him tighter, and I couldn't help but accept it, even snuggling into him more. It was only when Eraserhead gave a polite cough that we realized he was still in the room and slightly separated, but not by much. Eraserhead was the first to speak. "I hate to break up this moment, however, we need to call in a detective so they can fill out a report and start an investigation into the people." Even though Eraserhead was talking facts, he never stopped speaking kindly. However, I could see there was a touch of sadness in his eyes. "Why are you sad?" I asked in the same scratchy voice. At that moment, I could see him panic, looking away from me to Nezu like he was asking for help. All Nezu did though was give a soft chuckle. Tilting my head in confusion, I wondered what was so funny. My son chapter summary. From now on, if you like, I will be fostering you, and if you would allow it, I would also like to adopt you. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter 4. Sign language. After that, everything moved fast. Eraserhead called for the doctor, who then told me my injuries and treatment. It turned out I was in worse condition than I thought. Broken bones, burns that unfortunately would scar badly, malnutrition, and incorrectly healed injuries. It was bad, and apparently, I even had some sickness called pneumonia that I didn't even realize. When the doctor finally finished explaining everything, he then proceeded to unwrap the bandages around my body. The more skin that was revealed, the more everyone was able to understand the severity of my injuries. I was littered with old and new scars. Most of them looked starburst-like, while others were just areas where flesh was missing. There were a few scars that were cuts, but they were far and in between. By the time all the bandages had been removed and the scars underneath were revealed, the room's energy had fallen. Nezu had a dark look across his face. Aizawa was clutching his capture scarf tightly, and the doctor himself was holding his anger back. As Izuku saw this, he started to close into himself, worried the anger was directed towards him. Fortunately, he didn't have enough time to contemplate that train of thought before there was a knock on the door. The door opened to show a tall man in a trench coat. Obviously, the detective called. As soon as Izuku saw him, he moved closer to Nezu, seeking comfort from him while this unfamiliar man walked into the room. Looking over at Aizawa, he found him already looking at Izuku, that sadness back in his eyes. Before he could dwell on that though, the detective started talking. "Good evening. I understand I am here to confirm a statement so that young Midoriya here can be placed in a different home." When all he got was a nod from Aizawa, he swiftly moved on. "Very well. I will need to record this interview then. Due to legal reasons, I must let you know that my quirk is called Lie Detector, and as a side effect I cannot lie. Due to my quirk in your situation, I will be asking you yes or no questions that I need you to verbally answer. Is that okay? Again, he waited for a response. This time Aizawa and Nezu looked at Izuku waiting for an answer. Izuku's pav I looked at the detective for a long while just mulling over his words. Was I okay with this? I understand the need to record the interview for evidence, but why did they need a lie detector? Did they not believe me? No, that can't be it. Nezu and Aizawa have been so nice to me, they said they believed me. This must just be to make sure no one can discredit my statement. Yes, that's it. Okay, I can do this. Having come to a decision, I give the detective still waiting patiently for my answer a nod. At my nod, he got out a tape recorder and started. This is Detective Naomasa Tsukachi, quirk lie detector being used for the interview. For the record, can you state your name? Midoriya Izuku. Due to the condition of Midoriya, I will be asking yes or no questions to confirm previously stated claims. For the record, this is not an interrogation, this is only to make sure that no one can discredit Midoriya's statement later on. Now, let us begin. Midoriya, you have a physically affecting animal mutation, also known as PAAM. Yes, or no? Yes, true. Midoriya, at the age of 4 when your quirk came in, your mother started abusing you. Yes, or no? Yes, true. You're doing great, Midoriya. When your quirk came in, your classmates started illegally using their quirks against you. Yes, or no? Yes, true. Final question. This one I'm going to need a more detailed answer for, is that okay? Nervously I nod my head. Okay. Can you please explain to me what caused you to try to commit suicide yesterday? Before answering the question, I took a breather, making sure that the grip I had on Nezu's hand was secure. Then when I was ready, I spoke. Yesterday was bad. Kei-Kachan added 2 new scars after he learnt that I want to go to Uua. Before he left, he told me to. When I was on my way to the park I got attacked by a villain only to have a All Might save me. When I asked him if I could become a hero, he said that someone like me couldn't be a hero. I later saved Kei-Kachan from the villain All Might saved me from. Only for Kachan to start hurting me again. The next thing I knew I was on the roof and then. I couldn't even finish before I started to break down into tears, curling up into Nezu's chest. The warmth and protection I felt from him made it so I couldn't even start to fall into a panic attack. However, the comfort made me start to fall into a dissociative sleep. In the background I could feel Nezu's arms around me, holding me close. I could hear the detective say something. But then I once again only knew darkness. Nezu's pav, it was worse than expected. I had specifically asked the detective to only ask yes or no questions because I didn't want this to happen. However, I guess there was no way of avoiding the need for an open-ended question. Most of this we already knew because of previous comments, and some of it we could see the proof or aftermath on his body. But to hear the catalyst for what broke the camel's back is just heartbreaking. This child, this adorable, sweet child that was meant to be loved and protected, was hated and hurt. To have this child that he thought of as his hurt so much and still be so sweet caused me to physically feel pain. Not only did I promise myself to not have anyone else go through what I did, but I also saw this child as my own. His adorable face and his sweet personality worried about me when he should be worried about himself. Trusting me so easily when others are and would be cautious. This child is so precious that I can't help but want to protect him, to love and spoil him. And I pity anyone who tries to stop me. After Izuku had curled up, Tsukachi ended the recording, but not before confirming the statement as true. As soon as the recorder was turned off, all hell broke loose, theoretically. Tsukachi was swearing like a sailor, already pulling his phone out to make a call. Aizawa was struggling to not use his quirk, pacing up and down while ignoring his ringing phone. Through this all, though, both of them made sure they weren't loud enough to wake Izuku up. Everything seemed to stop in its tracks when there was a knock at the door. Collectively we turned to look at the door before looking down at Izuku's sleeping peaceful face. Silently. Tsukachi moved to the door and opened it enough to just peek his head out, checking who it was. When the tense posture of the detective relaxed, Aizawa and I relaxed along with him. Quietly he moved aside, opening the door for the other person, finger on his lips in a shushing motion. As he moved aside, he revealed present Mike aka Hisashi Yamada. Now the shushing made sense. The revealing of Mike caused Aizawa to become confused and shocked by his presence. Pulling out his phone, he realized he had a variety of missed calls and texts from Mike informing Aizawa that Mike had arrived at the hospital, wondering what room he was in. "Hey Sho. Sorry for just showing up to the little listener's room, but you weren't picking up your phone, so I figured you were sleeping or needed some help with the little listener," Mike said. Before Mike and Aizawa could start a heated discussion on Aizawa's ability with kids, I cleared my throat. It seemed that Mike hadn't noticed that I was there as when he saw me. Sitting on the hospital bed cradling Izuku, he started so much he almost used his quirk. Even though Aizawa's quirk saved us from being defended, he was not able to stop the shout of alarm to wake Izuku up. With a whine, Izuku snuggled up closer to me, one hand clutching my suit tightly while the other came to cutely rub his eyes, slowly waking up. When he realized that there was someone new in the room, Izuku curled up more, hiding his face in my chest, his ears twitching and curling down to his scalp while his tails curled around me and Izuku's waists. As cute as the scene was, all four men couldn't help but have their hearts break at the thought that little Izuku was scared of meeting someone new. Not letting the situation get out of hand, Aizawa quickly walked over, kneeled in front of the pair and started to gently stroke one of Izuku's tails. "Hey there Kit, this is my husband Hisashi Yamada, but you might recognize him as the pro-hero present Mike. You don't have to worry, you can trust him. He won't hurt you." At the admission of who the new man was, Izuku peeked one of his eyes out to look back and forth between Aizawa and the now identified present Mike. Seeming to trust him, if only a little, Izuku brought his face full out from my chest and brought his hands up to sign. "Hero?" "Yeah kid, he's a hero," I replied this time. He quickly looked up to as if only just realizing who he was snuggled up with. I just smiled at him, trying to let him know that everything was fine without words. Looking up, I motioned for Mike to come closer and introduce himself. "Hey little listener, I'm Hisashi Yamada. I heard you were here and wanted to come introduce myself and see how you were doing." "Why? You don't know me, you have no reason to see me." "Well, this grump over here was so worried about you that I wanted to make sure you were okay. You might not know this, but he usually doesn't show his emotions when he called me. Though, he was very worried, and I wanted to meet the little listener who could bring out this side of him." Without saying anything, Izuku turned to look back at Aizawa, his head tilted slightly in question. Aizawa himself didn't say anything but did nod his head in confirmation. Izuku's eyes seemed to light up at the confirmation, looking excitedly at me, pointing at Aizawa and then himself. The pure innocence of the situation melted my heart, and from the looks on the other men's faces, their hearts weren't faring much better. Unfortunately, the heartfelt moment didn't last much longer. At that moment, the doctor walked back into the room, a clipboard in hand, a sour look on his face. Unfortunately, there was an incident resulting in many injuries. As we are the closest hospital, all the victims will be transported here. My superiors have seen fit to remove some people from their rooms to make space for the victims. Unfortunately, they're quirkest bastards, so they have seen fit to remove all those who have PAM from the hospital. Seeing as you have PAM, they also decided that they were going to remove you first. I have done everything I could so you will be able to still get treatment. However, unless you have a guardian that will argue on your behalf, I will be unable to keep you here." The devastating news hit 3 times. The first, there was a villain attack, meaning people were hurt, and the second, Izuku was being removed from the hospital. And the third final thing, he didn't have a guardian to protect him from this quirkist society. As the bad news kept piling up, I became more desperate to do something. Just then a thought came to me, and from the look on Aizawa and Mike's faces, they came up with the same idea. In the following silence, the three of us turned to look at each other, a battle of wills fighting each other. Finally, Aizawa spoke. "It should be me, no Mike, and I are the best people for it." "I disagree. I think that considering everything, I would be the best person to do this, plus you both are far too busy with 5 jobs between the both of you. So I think if this did come to a fight, combining my reputation and my situation, I would be the one to win. So what will it be? Fight or give in?" We stood there staring at each other for what seemed like forever. It was only Izuku tugging on my shirt that broke the stare. Looking down, I was met with a questioning look on Izuku's face as he started pointing between the two of them, obviously wondering what they were talking about. Before I could explain, Aizawa heaved a heavy sigh, conceding, "Fine, but I want visitation." With that said, I turned to the doctor and spoke. "I will be enacting my emergency fostering license on the grounds of abuse confirmed by Detective Tsukachi. As his new foster parent, I am made his legal guardian, giving me the authority to force your supervisors to keep my child in the hospital." The more I spoke, the more the doctor's smile grew until he was outright grinning, already taking out his phone to make a call, not even saying anything in response as he left the room in a hurry. Looking at the detective, I found a fond look on his face while he turned his phone off, having probably messaged his partner about the situation. Turning to look at Izuku, I saw a look of shock and amazement on his face. Before he could say or do anything, I gently grabbed his hand, getting his attention. With his focus now on me, I explained the situation. "From now on, if you like, I will be fostering you, and if you would allow it, I would also like to adopt you." Chapter end notes. Hi guys. I am so sorry for not updating for a while. Life has been hectic, but I am going to try and update more often. I hope you enjoy the new chapter. Smiley face. You're alive. Right? Chapter summary. Hey guys. Sorry this took so long to come out. Some really bad things have been going on in my life and I had to sort through some things. I will try to have chapters out sooner. But enjoy. Izuku's POV, sign language. Adoption. That was a big word. A big word with a lot of weight to go with it. He didn't just want to look after me for the time being. He wanted to keep me. Love him, hold me. Be my dad? Is this right? But then the hope filling me gets crushed. Adoption means being part of a family that isn't yours. It means that your family doesn't want you. It means you don't have a family. Something that should have made me so happy made me so sad. I wanted to be happy that Nezu wanted me, and I was really, but I was so scared as well. What if he realized that I wasn't worth the effort? What if one day he looks at me and realizes that he made a mistake? Looking up at Nezu, I was about to ask him this myself when the doctor came back in. When he came in, the sour look on his face was gone but had been replaced by a hurt look. Walking closer to me, a nurse walked into the room behind him carrying a sort of kit. Standing in front of me and Nezu, he crouched down and started talking in a soft voice. "Hey there bud, I need to ask you a hard question. Is that okay? Are you fine with the other people in the room hearing your answers? If not, I can kick them out for you," he said very nicely. Not really understanding what he was going to ask me, I just accepted. "I need to know if anyone has ever raped you," the doctor said. My heart stopped. My breathing stopped. It felt like the world stopped. All I could hear was the ringing in my ears. All I could see was the static in front of me. All I could do was panic. How did he find out? I didn't tell anyone. I made sure no one knew. No, this isn't good. He shouldn't have known. No one can know. Without me realizing, I had started to hyperventilate. I could breathe. I couldn't see. It felt like I was falling. Falling. Then there was a hand in my hair, and I could breathe. The hand was soft, like it was covered in fur. It was rubbing just behind my left ear, causing my body to relax little by little. The tension left my body and I started to breathe again. With the ability to breathe came back my other senses. I could hear the worried voices around and above me. I could feel the sheets under me and a soft hand on my head. I could see Nezu kneeling in front of me, a worried look on his face. Focusing on only him, I let myself calm down and let my worries flow away. I was at the hospital. I was saved. These people believe me. They're helping me. Now that I was calm, I started looking around the room to see that the other people had such a sad look on their faces. Aizawa was comforting present Mike, who was crying. To be honest, he looked like he wanted to cry too. The detective had both a sad and angry look to him, typing hurriedly on his phone. And the doctor and nurse looked like their biggest fears had just been confirmed. Focusing on them, I signed. "How did you know?" They both didn't seem to know what I was saying until Nezu translated for me. The doctor then turned to me and said, "While you were asleep, we took you to get some x-rays done. The scans showed that there was some anal scarring and damage, consistent with what you would see of rape victims." That made sense. But that also made me scared, worried about how the others in the room glanced at Nezu, and instead of looking disgusted at me, he just looked sad and started to pull me closer. Nezu picked me up so he could sit back on the bed, this time with me in his lap. Usually this sort of situation would freak me out, being on someone's lap. However, the gentle way with which he was holding me close to his chest made me feel so safe. Curling in more, I looked back out into the room and signed to Aizawa. "Can you please translate for me?" Getting a nod in return, I looked back at the doctor and nurse and asked, "Now that you know, what are you going to do?" After Aizawa translated, the doctor started to explain. "Well, this kit here with me is called a rape kit. We use it to inspect the area and see if we can find any DNA to tie to the person who did it, while also looking to see if we can fix any damage that there might be. Would that be okay with you? Instead of answering right away, I let myself think it through. Was I okay with a stranger poking around my butt and seeing such a private area of myself? No, I wasn't. I wasn't comfortable with everyone in the room seeing it either. Looking around the room, I came to a decision. You can do what you need to do, but can Nezu do it? I don't want a stranger looking there. I also don't want everyone in the room, only the doctor and Nezu. Once again Aizawa translated for me. As soon as he finished, everyone except the doctor and Nezu left the room. Before the nurse left, they put the kit on the table beside me. Before we started, Nezu moved me off his lap. Even though I knew this had to happen, it still pulled a whine out of me. I didn't want to leave the safe, warm arms. When Nezu put me down, he had me laying on my stomach. Feeling nervous, I grabbed one of the pillows next to me, cuddling my face into it. When I felt my hospital gown being lifted, I started to space out, not wanting to think or feel what was about to happen. Letting my eyes unfocus and my mind drift to nothingness, I floated in the peace that overcame me. The word falling away. Nezu's paw. When the doctor came back, I thought nothing of it until I noticed the distraught face of him and his nurse. And when he came over to the kit, I expected the worst. That expectation did not prepare me for the bombshell he dropped. Raped. The little kid next to me was raped. And while I would have loved to agonize over that shocking piece of information, I needed to focus, because Izuku had started both having a panic attack and disassociating. Not a good combination. Getting off the bed, I kneeled down in front of the kid and just kept running my hand through his hair, murmuring reassurances to try and get him out of his head and back to me. When it finally looked like he was back with us and before I could ask him if he was okay, he signed. How did you know? That innocent and frightening question broke my heart, as did hearing him confirm the fear in all our hearts. As the doctor explained all the technical stuff, I couldn't help but be really concerned about the kid. He was so young, and to go through all this. There was some heroes I knew that couldn't handle this. I was brought out of my thoughts when Izuku asked if I could do the physical exam with only the doctor in the room. While it made me happy that he trusted me with this, it broke my heart that he wasn't comfortable in the first place with any of this happening. For now I didn't think about it. Once everyone was out of the room and the kit was easily accessible, we got started. As soon as we started, Izuku started dissociating. It was kinda of expected. However, even though it was expected, it didn't mean it still didn't hurt. The exam itself revealed some things. Namely that there was indeed recent DNA left behind, the implications of that. And that based on the scaring both new and old, that this started when the kid was about 7 years old. This was not okay. When the exam was finally over, I made sure the hospital gown was covering everything again before moving him back into my lap in a side straddle. As the doctor left, he told everyone waiting outside to come back in while he went and got the evidence to testing. When everyone came back into the room, it was subdued and quiet. Aizawa was the first to break it. "How bad is it?" he asked. All I could do was shake my head. It was bad, and no amount of words could describe that. They all seemed to get it as everyone's faces fell even more. Before any more could be said, the kit started move, small whining sounds leaving his mouth. Instantly, I started stroking his head, making little shushing noises to try and soothe him. It seemed to work, as after a few minutes he lifted his head, a sleepy look in his eyes. He looked around the room, taking everyone in before going back to laying his head on my shoulder, nuzzling into my neck with little sniffing breathes. Whatever he smelt must have been nice, as he started to purr loudly, his hands gripping onto me tightly, not wanting to let go. This action made everyone in the room just start cooing at how adorable he was. After a few more minutes of this, he fell into a light sleep, still purring and holding onto me tight. As he slept, we all just sat around him in silence, just making sure in our own heads that he was really okay. Please drop by the archive and comment to let the creator know if you enjoyed their work.